Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. It has been a while since our last podcast, and we are so happy to be back with another episode of The Real Public Servants. I am Angelique Crumbly.
And I'm Angela McNerney.
So, Happy New Year again. There's been a lot happening since we last engaged. There's some good news and some bad news. We're going to be focusing on the good news. Um, we, well, we'll say it this way. The government is partially closed. So the good news is that there are six appropriation bills that have been signed. The one for the legislative branch, for VA, for ag, for commerce, energy and water, interior and environment. So SNAP benefits are funded through the end of the fiscal year. You can go to the state parks, and of course, the Veterans Administration is fully funded. However, on the downside, Angela.
That's right. On the downside, there are six bills that were modified, at least one. The Department of Homeland Security is modified by the Senate, which has now sent this package of these six back over to the House. And so we're in a partial shutdown, and those are Treasury, National Security and State Department, Homeland Security, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education, that's all one bill, and Transportation and Housing and Urban Development. So the biggie, though, is defense is included in those six as well. So until such time as the House can bring it to the floor to take a vote on this minibus as it was modified by the Senate, those services are in a lapse right now.
Has the House been called back? It has been called
The
back,
House is
right?
back. The House is back. Yes.
Okay.
And so urging all members to make their way speedily.
Yes. So, well, we're going to think positive, and hopefully that will not last longer than another couple of days. Another good piece of news is we're getting past Winter Storm Fern. I still have been shoveling my driveway. It only took like 4 different days of shoveling to get past the ice. What about you? Isn't it cold in Florida?
It is. It is. Now we had flurries. We had some flurries.
Really?
We didn't shovel any sand this time, but it's been cold.
Okay.
It is cold.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
I don't know. It was 7 here when I woke up. I mean, we're in those kind of digits. So hopefully you're not quite that cold down there.
Well, teens. Yeah.
You're in the
we're
teens. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Well, we're gonna think positive thoughts,
that's
and
right.
that we're gonna warm up. Isn't it Groundhog Day? Punxsutawney Phil
Yes.
is what, tomorrow or something like that. So we're gonna think positive about ye old groundhog. So today we want to talk about checks and balances between the executive and legislative and judicial branches of government, because we have been hearing a lot about, I guess we could say, noise in the system about the lack of oversight and the inability to check executive presidential powers. So we want to take a look at each branch, their responsibilities in this area, and what could be, I guess we can say, what could be done better, or even if things go further south, what does that mean in terms of the rule of law and other things.
Right.
So we're going to start off, as we usually do, with kind of the history of it. So we're going to go to the first slide, which discusses the Constitution. And so the Constitution basically lays out the 3 branches of government. Congress, where all legislative powers are vested in a Congress, which is the House and the Senate, made up of 2 bodies, the Senate and the House. The executive branch has all power vested in the president, and then the judicial branch, where there's one Supreme Court, and we can talk about the structure there. But I think that the key here is that they establish 3 branches, and then they lay out what it is their overall responsibilities are. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to you, Angela.
Okay.
And you can take us through this piece.
Yeah. So we're again, this is understanding the checks and balances and the system that is laid out again in the Constitution. So the legislative branch has the power to make laws, has the power to declare war, and it has the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. It has other powers as well, such as overriding presidential vetoes. We don't see that a lot, but
No.
we did, I think, have one recently that came back up, and it had to do with, I think, some land. And anyway, it didn't get overridden. Then they also can control funding, right? They also have the power of the purse, and so we're going to focus today in our discussion. We're really going to take a dive into three specific ones: making laws, declaring war, and the regulating commerce. So just a reminder in the next slide, again, just our little civic lesson here is that, so what is a law? And so
I totally love Schoolhouse Rock there.
yes,
That was
so
very good.
Schoolhouse Rock. So for those of you who may not have ever seen the cartoon for Schoolhouse Rock and How Does a Bill Become a Law, we encourage you, once this gets it's posted in our resources, to take a look at that, how Bill becomes a law.
I won't
And
say
so right now, it's just it's again, I don't know what they're teaching these days
I
in
don't
elementary
either. No.
school, whether they're using Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law. But anyway, that tells our age. So right now, again, just the example of the appropriations. So right now, those bills, right, those appropriation bills, those 6 right now that were drafted by the House, because the House always starts the drafting of appropriations. And then once they pass it, they send it over to the Senate. Okay. And then the Senate votes on it. And they have to vote on it as the House sent it over to them in that bill. Well, they didn't do that. They modified the bill that came to them last week. And therefore, now the House gets another chance to take a look at their modifications. And so that bill has now been modified, and the House will look at it and vote on it. Now, what will happen is, because the Senate modifications were approved in the Senate, it doesn't go back to the Senate unless the House messes with it. So anyway, so that's the bill, and then how to become a law? It has to go down to the president, right? The president in the executive branch, because the power lies down there to actually to put it into law. So that's the making laws. We'll talk a little bit about declaring war and the regulating commerce with foreign nations. But if we can go on to the next slide, we want to just talk a little bit about the oversight between these branches. Primarily here, we're talking about the legislative and the executive branch. Okay, so as we have now, we have the same party in the executive branch and in the House and the Senate, right, in the legislature, right? And so it doesn't mean that you shouldn't provide oversight of your executive.
Right.
So, Angelique, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can give some examples of where this came up in history, where there has been oversight.
Right. So one of the things we hear a lot is that basically the House and the Senate have ceded their power because the president is the head of the party, right? And so if the president is as the head of the party is decided something, then you automatically have to support it. But what we've seen through history is that ultimately the Congress has to do the job that the Constitution requires that they do. And that means that they have to provide oversight of the executive branch. And we decided to take a look at, okay, well, where have we seen it, where we've seen the same party for both the White House and the Congress. So we looked at the Democratic side and we saw the Truman Committee basically during the Democratic presidency of FDR Democratic Senator Harry Truman chaired the special committee to investigate the National Defense Program. It basically aggressively exposed waste, fraud, and abuse in wartime production, saving the government billions of dollars and actually launching Truman into the national kind of spotlight. And then we saw in 45, he actually became Roosevelt's vice president. Another example were the Vietnam War hearings. Democratic Senator William Fulbright, and I think there's a Fulbright scholarship, he was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he held public hearings on the Vietnam War during the administration of fellow Democrat Lyndon Baines Johnson. And even on the Republican side, we had Watergate in 1973 to 74, where there were investigations into President Nixon. And we saw some critical moments of same party oversight, even though the Senate was controlled by the Democrats. Senator Howard Baker famously asked the question, what did the president know and when did he know it? So the Republicans held his feet to the fire. And then in, I think, 2004 and 2005, we had Abu Ghraib during the presidency of George Bush, where the Republican-led House and Senate conducted hearings on prisoner abuse at Abu Ghraib. So it is not something that you can say, oh, you know, if they were the same party in the White House as in Congress, there's going to be no oversight. We've seen it in the past. And so we want to ensure that we keep seeing it as we move forward. So, Angela, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the headlines of today, right, is that, I mean, you even have Rand Paul right now.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see whether or not a special committee is set up with regard to the Department of Homeland Security, its use of force in its immigration tactics.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
isn't Rand Paul chair of the Homeland Security Committee?
Homeland Security, yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah, in the
Mhm.
Senate. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see whether or not they will, same party, you know, whether they will call for not only for hearings. The hearings are already set, actually.
Correct. I think they start next week, don't they?
Yeah, exactly. So that's you know, that's a step. You know, you can have these committees, you can have these hearings. You know, how aggressive, right? The same party, right? Senators or congresspersons, how aggressively they will go after, especially in the Senate, where the Senate voted, right, to confirm the Secretary of Homeland Security, right, who is now going to come before them. So, I mean, hopefully they will use the power that they have and, you know, press.
Well, there is the question too of what, you know, we hear of what's going on in Minnesota, very alarming, very disturbing, and there have been calls for the impeachment of the current Secretary of Homeland Security. Right. So we're going to see what these in essence, what these hearings come out with. And does that mean they would move forward with impeachment? Does that mean that if they see some sort of, I guess, incompetence or problems in terms of executive management, that the Republican Party in both houses of Congress would press the president to move her, so we don't have to have an impeachment? All of that, I think, is still hanging out there. And I think people really want to see these oversight hearings to see what comes forth. And then you can make the decision on what will happen from there. So we'll see.
So anyway, I just wanted to bring it to today because I know, you know, you and I have talked, you know, we've talked a lot about it. And I think, you know, America's watching this one.
Yes.
And
yes. Well, America's watching too, because we've all been in the house because of Winter Storm.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, it's just.
You know, I think people are watching more TV than they ever have, or the news or other things. So, but again, you know, it is very, I think, critical because so much has happened in Minnesota, and we don't take that lightly. And that whole situation has not gone the way we would have
absolute
hoped.
Tragedy. Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
moving on to the next
Moving
slide.
on to the powers of the judiciary. And
All
so,
righty.
yeah, so Angelique, this is
So
back
I
over to
have to
you.
tell you, I wrote a paper when I was a freshman in college that the
Oh,
weakest part of the Constitution was actually the Supreme Court, believe it or not. So I have
okay.
felt strongly about this for a long time because I am a person who does not believe that the court should be appointed by any party. I think they should actually be elected by their peers, but that's just my view of things. So, but what we'll talk about is what does the Constitution say and what are the requirements? So, the Supreme Court is the judicial branch that's responsible, as we said earlier, for interpreting laws and ensuring that they align with the Constitution, acting as a key check on both the legislative, as Congress makes the laws, and the executive branch, the president enforces the laws, through what is called judicial review. While also depending on the other branches for enforcement and creating a system of checks and balances to prevent any single branch from becoming too powerful. So I always find that interesting
Yeah.
because it's symbiotic because Congress creates the other courts as well. So I want to talk a little bit about judicial review, and that is the court's main check. The main check is its power to declare laws passed by Congress or actions by the president unconstitutional. And this was established in the case of Marbury versus Madison back in 1803. So
Wow.
judicial review has been critical
Yep.
for 200 and some years. I won't do the math because, I'm not the math
A
person.
long
A
time.
long time,
That's right.
exactly. And, in terms of interpreting laws, under all of this, the courts resolve disputes and clarify the meanings of laws, and they ensure that they are applied fairly and within constitutional limits, right? And so that I think is key. In terms of the legislative branch, the court can strike down laws, Congress can impeach judges, and propose constitutional amendments. And in terms of the executive branch, the court can rule presidential actions unconstitutional, but the president appoints the judges with Senate approval and enforces court orders. And I think that enforcement piece is very critical, particularly these days, because there's a lot of talk about the Justice Department and again, the Attorney General, and these are the individuals who are responsible for the enforcement. So there's this question of if they're responsible for the enforcement and they choose not to do it, then what? Then what? That
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
a question. That's a question. So some people feel the Supreme Court is not actually willing to take on the really hard things. Like, for example, we had the citizen birthright issue, and there was a narrow ruling on whether or not federal judges could make, pronouncements for or at the national level. And that was all they ruled on. But it's going to come back again in 2026. So when we talk about the Supreme Court, there's a lot that is coming before the court, and I think on the next slide,
We'll
did we
talk a little
talk
bit
about
about
that?
the
Or we
structures you
talk
had
about
mentioned.
okay?
Yeah.
So let's be clear that thank you for reminding me that the court structure in the USA, obviously the Supreme Court, highest court of the land. There's also established the Court of Appeals, and there are several courts of appeals, but they're basically, if there is a lower court ruling, you can go up to the appeals court to relitigate, and then the Supreme Court ultimately. And once the Supreme Court rules, that's it. You also have district courts and bankruptcy courts, and there are several bankruptcy courts throughout. I think they're like in every state. And so the court structure, particularly the lower courts, a lot of that is comes through Congress, through how the laws are set related to that. So I think that's pretty much all we wanted to say, just to give everybody an understanding
Right.
of what is the hierarchy of the courts. So we can
Yeah.
pop to the next slide.
And maybe one thing, Angelique, on the court structures,
Mhm.
you'll hear a lot of the fact that the Supreme Court remands or sends back down
To the
to
lower
the lower
courts.
court
Mhm.
something to basically to look at again or to decide.
Mhm.
So most of what comes before them actually it goes back that way. I mean, they
Goes back down to the lower
yeah
courts. Yes,
yeah
because the Supreme Court is very, shall we say, they want to make sure their time is used wisely, I
that's right.
believe is how they said it. And so, in essence, when they look at what their agenda is or their docket is, a number of things they will take and a number of things they won't. And they
That's
will
right.
say,
Yeah.
we're not going to opine on this. And then they go back down to the lower courts.
Yep.
So, when we're talking about, okay, currently where are we and what's before the court, there are several areas that we wanted to highlight related to where we are in the court. And I think the key, I guess the key that I would want to note here is that this will make these court cases will make the, shall we call it, the Roberts Court, I think, take a very, very strong role historically, right? So let's just say that when you look at the courts, you say, okay, well, what's the Chief Justice? Who's the Chief Justice? And we know that John Marshall is most often cited as the greatest Chief Justice because he, in essence, he established judicial review and federal supremacy, and that was back in 1803, as we noted earlier. But the key is that he established that, and that is how we've been operating. We then have many people who have heard of, obviously, the Warren Court, and that is the court. He was Chief Justice, Earl Warren was Chief Justice 1953 through 1969. So that is the court that opined on the Civil Rights Act. And so we've heard
Yep.
recently some commentary on the Civil Rights Act and whether or not, shall we say, it has been helpful to some groups and not others. Again, I think when you look at the Civil Rights Act, look at history, I think we could say, in essence, I think it was moving to right some wrongs, and so hopefully, leveled the playing field as opposed to being negative for any other groups. The other, I think, justices that are very well known are are William Brennan and Thurgood Marshall, not
Yeah.
chief justices, but they are frequently mentioned for their profound impact on
Yeah.
society. So when we look back at the Roberts Court, I think these cases are
Yep.
going to be the ones that really define some things. When you look at the executive removal of powers, there we're talking about what's going on with Federal Reserve
Right.
members and the president looking at that one. Congressional redistricting, this one actually impacts as it relates to the Voting Rights Act of
Yep.
65. And so there is an actual race-based component related to that. Birthright citizenship, again, they've ruled on a process piece of it, but
Right.
the actual underlying piece is going to come back before the court. And then testing presidential authority. This is really about the tariffs and the funding. So, Angela, I'm going to
Yep.
shift it back over to
Yep.
you on that one.
Yep. So again, we looked at you talked a little bit about the three powers in the legislative branch. There's more than three, but we're going to focus on again the making of the laws. So just before we get to the testing of the presidential authority, we just want to talk just a little bit about the law around the release of the Epstein files. Okay, and so we've just had some additional movement by the Department of Justice. But again, it was a law, it was a bill, right? The bill was sent down to the president. The president signed it into law back in November of last year,
Mhm.
which said that the Department of Justice was to release all files on December 19th, I think.
Yep.
And in that law, it also said it narrowed what the Department of Justice could redact. Okay. It was mainly for the
Mhm.
protection of the survivors, right?
Mhm.
As it should be. So they failed to meet the law by failing to release by December 19th. So come January 19th, I think, right, about 30 days later, I think they were compelled really to go back into the Justice Department was called back into the court and to say, what are you doing? Where are these things? You see, let's just say one piece of a tremendous piece of fallout here is that we talked about oversight by same party. Well,
Mhm.
we had Marjorie Taylor Greene, right, in this particular law, right,
Yes.
who basically stood up and basically she said, "I'm walking away."
Mhm.
Right, the president, no, this you signed this, release it now, and here we are. So what 2 days ago, or
Mhm.
Friday, was it Friday,
Friday.
3
It was
million more
Friday. 3
documents
million more
were
documents.
finally, right, were finally released again.
But they still have
They're
3 million that haven't been. I think another 3
Yeah,
million that have not been released.
right, right. So again, here it is. We have making of the law. President signs a law. His own executive branch doesn't comply. Right, and so you've got pressure in the public domain, right, which is really, I think, where this one is really bubbling up. And so we'll see
Mhm.
how that concludes. But anyway, that was one
Mhm.
particular law, and there's a lot of interest in it right now.
But
That
I think though, going back to your point, that you have okay, so what if the Justice Department doesn't? Who
That's right. So
enforces it?
what will the legislative branch do? Right? Will
Mhm.
they, what do you do? What are you going to do? You're going to haul, Pam Bondi up there? Right? They are.
Right.
I mean, they are, right? That's
Yes.
supposed to happen here in the next
Right.
week or two. But, how do you the oversight, right? How do you
Correct.
compel them
Correct.
to do
It,
this?
it goes
Right?
back
So,
to the enforcement.
mhm.
It is you're asking them to enforce on themselves. And how does that
Right.
work?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that
So,
again, like the Supreme Court, you don't want to be politicized. There's
mhm.
also talk we hear all the time that because there is a conservative majority, that the conservative majority is swinging toward the party, right, of
Yeah.
you know to the right, let's just say it that way. And yeah, that gets back to my earlier view of, okay, is this the right thing that you have the Supreme Court judges actually appointed by a president? And this is whether it's Democrat or
Right.
Republican.
Right now. Exactly. Yeah.
Shouldn't it be an objective thing? Are those things that, when you talk about, well, what can we as a regular American citizens do?
Mhm.
Is this something we want to press Congress to do, or the next president to, change the law? And, that's hard, but sometimes, you have to do that if you really want to ensure that government is
There's
objective.
impartiality, right? That you're actually
Exactly.
doing it on the merits of the case as it comes before
Exactly.
you, right?
Exactly.
So
And
okay,
not any leanings. So anyway,
yeah,
we're going to see where these four,
yep,
court cases go. Again, it will, in my opinion, humble as it is, will, define the Roberts Court,
yeah, right,
and we'll see which way this goes.
yeah. I think that you talked about the testing of presidential authority, so that one on global tariffs, right? So regulating
Mm-hmm.
commerce with foreign nations.
Mm-hmm.
The president declared these global tariffs,
Mm-hmm.
and he was sued. The executive branch was sued.
Mm-hmm.
So the Supreme Court has before it right now and has not issued its opinion of whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act authorizes the tariffs imposed by President Trump pursuant to the national emergencies declared in his executive order.
Right.
Okay. Right. So that's the first thing that they need to decide is whether or not that particular act authorizes tariffs to be imposed by the
Mm-hmm.
president. Then, secondly, if it does, if the act does authorize it, whether the statute unconstitutionally delegates legislative authority to the president,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because the president doesn't make laws alone, and this is where a
Correct.
lot of executive orders are finding themselves, and that's why they're on the
Mm-hmm.
emergency route or the emergency docket. right, at the
Yes.
Supreme Court, because
Hmm.
he's issuing these orders that are like, wait, whoa, 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 that what are you doing? You know,
Right.
that's the legislative branch's role.
Right.
So,
But again,
yeah,
the court's influence depends on the willingness of the other branches and political actors to actually respect its interpretations.
that's right.
So if
Absolutely.
they decide they're going to strike these things down
That's right.
or say, hey, executive orders are executive orders, but they are not the full force of the law, then what? Okay. And again, the executive order is the birthright citizenship.
Yeah.
So it's coming. So
Right.
how is that going to work?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's something
Absolutely.
that we all should pay attention to. I think it's something we should think about. And again, my view is always talk to your Congress people
Yes.
about
Absolutely.
what it is that they should be doing and advocating for on our behalf. You know, I heard somebody say it's not the government that has, you know, that should, you know, be scared of the be frightening the people. It's the people who have the power over the government. It is a
Right.
we the people
We the
thing.
people. That's right.
And I think as citizens, it is our responsibility, you know, as former public servants, it is
That's
our
right.
responsibility to really hold our elected officials accountable and make our voices heard, whether
Yes.
that is
Absolutely.
exercising our First Amendment, whether it's calling our Congress people, whether it's writing an op-ed. But, you know, we really need to do that. And I think this is a serious time,
Right.
you know, and you know, we talked about Minneapolis. We talked about how serious all of that is. And you know, Angela, we haven't talked
Yeah.
about it, but, you know, as two people very strong in terms of our faith, you
That's
know,
right.
I do want to make sure that, you know, we do talk about, you know, we want to make sure the moral compass is right. Right.
That's right. Yeah.
And, you know, that
Absolutely.
as a nation, our moral compass is for right, not for wrong, and that we respect the norms and the ethics and the morals, because we
And
want to make
the
sure, and the
humanity in each of
humanity,
us that's
exactly, exactly.
innate.
And I
Yeah.
think, you know, norms seem not to have any meaning anymore, and that's just not a good thing.
That's right. Yeah.
And so you know, people say, "Oh, I don't believe in politics," or "I don't believe in this." Well, politics is every part of your life, whether you know, whether you get SNAP benefits, whether you got some family member in jail, whether you got, you know, working, you know, or health challenges. The reality is, we all have a responsibility to care and to engage. And so I
That's
just
right.
recommend
Yeah.
that because I
Yeah.
just am really worried
Yeah,
about
and the thing,
where we're going.
you don't throw out when you're going to vote, you don't throw out who you are,
Right,
what you stand for,
right,
right?
right.
You know, so we carry that, and we talked a lot about the fact that, you know, we worked for the executive branch, right? And
Hmm.
we knew that, you know, there may have been times when we didn't completely agree, but, you know, that was we took an oath,
That's
and
right.
that's what we did. But it doesn't mean that we threw out uh,
Yes,
our morals.
right. We
And
still had a moral
yeah,
compass.
that's right. Right. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, and it's a
Yeah,
challenge. I mean, I think this is, again, a very challenging time for a lot of our colleagues
yeah,
in the federal government.
yeah.
Um,
Yes.
you know, it's one thing that you are carrying out the the orders and the laws, right,
Hmm.
and policies, but at the same time, you know, large swaths are also being sort of disparaged,
Yeah.
and just you have to wonder sometimes, like, what is this government? What are we doing?
Right. Right.
Right. So,
And again, what is our point here?
mhm,
To support the real public servants.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
you know, none of that disparaging. We've
yes,
seen now
exactly.
that Doge, oh, it was a
Hmm.
mistake and all of that. But many people lost their jobs, many people had were just vilified. And so again, you know, let's support our public servants and realize that
Yep,
they're here to help all of
they're right
us.
here. They're here to serve the American public,
That's right. That's
and
right.
so
That's right.
uh,
So I will climb down off my
yeah,
soapbox. We'll go to the last slide. Anytime you want to contact us,
yep,
please feel free to contact us at this Gmail account. We're looking forward to having guests on the show. We're working with the IGs, and hopefully we will have a confirmation soon. But we're just, again, really happy to be here, really happy
Yeah.
to, engage with those who have been engaging with us, and just want to thank everybody, and we will see you next time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.